Last week we began our Lenten series where we're going to pay attention to our liturgy and how it expresses and shapes our identity as Anglicans. Helen challenged us and opened us last week by inviting us to use each and every one of our senses in our encounter with the divine, asking how that would be, stretching us sideways and inviting us to a full-bodied embrace of God encounter. For in liturgy, this very particular communal act that we join together in, we can participate with all of our senses. The only thing we're missing is some incense. Wilf? Our liturgy, if you like, you see, in posture and in word, in music and ritual, unlike anything we do anywhere else, together we bring into being, we speak in understanding of divine presence alive among us. Our liturgy gives us a framework to express ourselves within. Our building gives us a place to be held and to be housed within. In the workshop that followed last week, we explored, took a quick glimpse of history, 5-minute history of the Anglican Church and how our liturgy has emerged, of the shifts and changes in the theological and the sociological landscapes that have had a profound impact on how we understand what we do in liturgy. Profound effect, even as the structure of our liturgy remains. We continue to be faithful, obedient, if you like, to that tradition, to its structure and form. Just as a wonderful building housing us expresses a theology from a time and social context quite different to now, it still is a place with integrity where we can worship and be relevant in our time. So with our liturgy, we inherit a shape and a form from a tradition that well predates us, yet it still can house words and music and action and colour and drama with integrity and relevance to the context of our time. Perhaps an example might help to illustrate the influence theological understanding, contextual worldview has on what we make real and visible, what we express publicly in those set-aside sanctuary places we call church. How many of you know Holy Trinity Cathedral at all? A little bit? You know what it looks like? Yeah. It is a building that reflects in its structure both theological change and contextual application. My first placement of ministry was there. I was there for about 4 years. And as you know, the building has that, well, other than St Mary's and Holy Trinity, which was moved across the road, we're just dealing with the concrete building at this stage. You'll recognise that the old part, now known as the chancel, was the first built part of the cathedral, and it is a structure and style of building not dissimilar to St Matthew's in its form. Of course, it's quite a different building, but what it does have is it has those high-reaching arches that literally draw your eyes skyward, as if you are looking to the heavens. The altar is at the far reach end, long away from us common people gathered here. The walls are thick and fairly impenetrable with little natural light. Seats are in choir formation, which means you get to face one another, and so you're side on to the altar. The newer part of the cathedral is entirely different. It was once explained to me, as it happens to be, by an architect, so he probably knew what he was talking about. The intention of Professor Toy was to create a sense of a roof that floated, with walls that were porous to the outside world, the coloured glass of those walls reflecting and expressing the world in this place, Aotearoa, New Zealand, the word in this place. Rather than shut itself away, it was to be a place that mingled with the life of the everyday where people gathered, a marketplace of intersect where word and world joined, the real life of real people gathered in the embrace of divine presence. As you might gather, that explanation really stuck with me, and the building really does, in many ways, speak that way. And of course, since then, many things have changed. The divide between old and new, those things that separated them, the bridge, have gone, integrating the building. Another chapel that has completely transparent walls has been built. It provokes a confidence to dare to say we too can find and know God as God is revealed in this place. We are responsible to speak and to make real with the things of this land our experience of that. But to return to liturgy, and the idea last week we were given a structure and a shape. This week I want to look into it a little bit. I want to look into the colour and the fabric that we use to enhance that liturgy we receive, to pay attention to these garments, or vestments as we call them, peculiar to churches that align themselves with the practice of a tradition through time. Vestments also carry a story. They trace a history of continuity through change. Some of them are coloured, and they change colour according to the liturgical season. The season of the church year that is patterned by the story of Jesus' life, rather than nature's seasons. Having said that, inevitably these colours will reflect the world that is going on outside. As inheritors of a tradition that is grounded in the Northern Hemisphere, of course, our experience of seasons as set by the liturgical tradition is inverted. The season of Lent, as Helen was explaining to the children, gains its name from the lengthening of days, experienced from winter towards spring. The new life and light of Easter from darkness experientially makes a lot more sense when you're going from the middle of winter to spring. Whereas our experience, maybe we could call it short instead of Lent. What do you think? A journey from light into darkness is the Lenten journey to Easter. That is the one that we take in the Southern Hemisphere. It changes the experience that is assumed by that liturgy that we inherit. The journey is no less powerful, but the potency of the symbols and the colours might require some translation from that first intended. These funny things that we wear, these garments, are now almost only used in a liturgical context, and yes, they do seem strange, especially without a frame of reference. How many of you have been to a really big church occasion? You know, where there's lots of these people wearing funny hats and, sorry, I'm not meant to say that, am I? Say a consecration of a cathedral or the ordination of a bishop, the sort of occasion where there's got bishops and archbishops and other people of hierarchical significance who are all kitted out in beautiful regalia with mitres and copes and all those flash things. If you take a step back and imagine you're someone who's a bystander from the street, it is the strangest sight to behold. It truly is. The men are all in dresses and they've all got pointy hats on. Well, a lot of them do. If you have no code to interpret it, it might appear as if some arcane ritual is being enacted. And generally speaking, everyone is dead serious. But the garments that we wear that may now seem strange do, in fact, have a very humble origin. Vestments that have become works of art were once just quite common workaday garments. The alb, this white thing, the undergarment, was just a common undergarment, and the chasuble that Helen's wearing was a common overgarment. They were first in the early use in church were kept incredibly plain because anonymity in time of persecution is really, really important. The garments of every day from that time have remained in the practice of the church, but that's a story for the workshop afterward. But if that's the case, then it means that the reason to have them was for them to be usable and for them to be functional, to protect and enable the person wearing them to carry out the tasks of the day. They were fit for purpose. Retained as garments in liturgy, it's perhaps interesting to ask about the purpose they now serve. They are identifiers, for sure. They're worn by people who are doing certain functional things within the liturgy, often around the sacrament of word or the bread and wine. It is a liturgy that only comes to life because we are gathered in this place. It is you and I that breathe it into life through our presence and our participation. In St. Matthew's, those who are in the serving party wear an alb, the white garment, and over this is laid a stole of office if a person happens to be ordained. And a chasuble is worn by the person who gathers and leads us as we enact that drama with bread and wine, the drama of Jesus' last meal with his friends. The whiteness of the alb is intentional, just as the seasonal colour of the stole and the chasuble are. They tell of a continuity of practice through time. They remind us there are changing seasons of the liturgy, but also in the year, also in our lives, in our journey with God. We are people who are creating liturgy as we participate, but we're also grounded in place and time. The vestments identify the purpose of a role within a liturgy, a role intended to enhance our flow, not interrupt, but complement what we're doing here. They provide us with a visual focus. So in a curious way, a bit like stained glass windows, they are teaching us something. They are informing us of something, because they reflect something of an identity of a place. Imagine, well, here at St Matthew's, like many city churches, you just have to observe rather than imagine. People wander in all the time to have a bit of a look around. And often on Sunday morning, what do you think they see, other than a lot of backs of heads if you happen to come in the back? Perhaps you've done this unknowingly overseas and wandered in thinking, this is a lovely church, and discovered a service is going on and went, whoops. But what you observe tells you quite a lot. What you interpret, of course, but the language of body posture, of action, of sound, colour, smell, all of those senses speak to and about the people in that place. Liturgy is our act of worship. Our actions, our words, our participation, our building all speak. They, we, are of a piece in expressing the faithfulness as we wanderers of Jesus are in this place and time. How intentional do you think we can be about what we say, what people see, and what we do? What about we begin with now, this day? We exist in this historic time and this geographical location. We have a physical place in a specific city and building, and we have a particular religious lineage with its unique story. Right now, the unique story is in the season we call Lent. So we're wearing purple. We don't hear Alleluias, they get buried in the box in the backyard till Easter. We don't say the Gloria or sing it. The music tends to be more sombre, and the readings are of repentance, insisting we are to be and to act differently. And if you heard today's gospel, how many of you went, don't really like the sound of that very much? How many of you felt uncomfortable about that? I think it's uncomfortable, especially if we hear it filtered through a tradition that interprets it as advocating there is some merit of self-denial for self-denial's sake. That the world should be rejected as a place of temptation and turmoil. There is a tradition that interprets it that way. We could choose to listen, and we could choose to enact our faith that says that. Today's gospel does tell us that choosing to follow Jesus will cause us to be changed. From the outset, what has Jesus said to call disciples? What we have told and passed to us is, come and see. Come, follow me. We can choose whether to accept that invitation. And there is a risk in accepting that invitation, as there is with any invitation, because we don't know where it's going to lead. When we yield to the invitation of another to come and see, in that very act, we give up our own plans. We give up the direction we thought we might take and our aspirations. Remember, we are invited to choose by a God made real in life, whose character, in the words of iconographer Mary Jane Miller, says, a God whose character does not force us to drink from the well of life, does not force us to walk the path of freedom or take on a life of prayer. God does not demand we build communities of love and inclusion or journey in the desert. God does not insist that we look into our neighbour's eyes with compassion and understanding, or gaze into a pool of water and see the beginning of creation. God does not demand we see ourselves as loved without question. It is our choice. How in our liturgy do we speak this, see this, taste and touch, invite participation in this? Our colour for the season is purple. Our liturgy reflects a choice to follow and live in a world that reveals that we are beloved of God and that will ask something of us in return. To raise our eyes from only self-concern, to risk opening our hearts and lives to learn of divine presence, that in turn will cause our hearts to be opened and our lives to be opened to those in this world we live in. Our faith is of a piece, it would seem. We are asked to choose. We've only the stuff of this creation, these amazing bodies, this most marvelous creation, with which to speak and to act and to bring to life, to reveal and make present in this time the God of the faith we each and every day are learning of. In this place where we gather to share, to strengthen, to listen, taste, touch, see, experience that which is other and in us and in and of the world, we together are making real in this time the God we are coming to know. What is it that we say? What do we reveal?